Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. Midnight Compass, Chapter 7, Aching, Part 2. Okay, for those of you who have not yet seen the first few videos for the Midnight Compass, I suggest you go view those now, as this is a continuation of that story. He had fallen asleep at some point. Rayla, Ray. Excuse me. Callum's voice cut through the fog of Rayla's mind as she began to stir. Callum was still in her arms. Zim was fast asleep on his lap. Huh? What? Rayla raised her head from Callum's, still in a little daze. But as she went to absent-mindedly rub her eyes, the sharp pain rang through her again, and she yelped in pain, twitching the arm cradling Callum away. And the poor human and dragon tumbled away from her to the ground with a panicked surprise. Followed by a squeak from Zim. Callum! Rayla reached out for him with her not quite as broken arm, but he raised a hand to wave her off. He raised a hand. Callum, you're... The boy righted himself, a little dazed, then sat up until he was kneeling in front of her, rubbing the back of his head. Yeah, I woke up, and I guess the poison must have worn off in the night. I didn't know how to wake you up. He smiled. He smiled awkwardly. I'm sorry. You seem so peaceful. I felt kind of bad. But my legs were going back to sleep and my back started to ache after a while. He scooped up Zim, who had stirred from this tumble, but it soon became apparent to both of them that the little dragon was still rather limp in Callum's arms. Hey, Zim, how you holding up? Zim whined a little and buried his face in Callum's chest, letting out a sad little grumble. Callum frowned. Still? He used a hand to lift one of Zim's paws and watched as he let it go, and it flopped back down again heavily. Zim peeked a big, sad eye open at him, and Callum scratched him sympathetically on the cheek. How about you? She watched his eyes glance her up and down, and his face betrayed his concern for her. Oh, yeah, I'm grand. I just love being beat up by some random mace and machete-wielding maniac. She smirked, but Callum's expression didn't falter. The boy shuffled forward a little, his hand sort of wavering towards her timidly. Her glance flickered between his hand and his eyes. Callum, what are you doing? His nose wrinkled a little. I don't know. I want to help somehow. She gave him a gentle but serious look, pulling herself carefully up so she was sitting a little straighter. You can help by carrying Zim. We need to get moving. Right now. Okay. Callum pulled himself up and reached out a hand for Rayla. She took it, hissing through her teeth, as all the aches and pains throbbed and shot through her. She staggered for a moment, her legs a little weak from the day before, but she steadied herself and, with a steely determination, took a step forward. Then she froze. The thoughts flashed across her mind of the hunter's face, and she remembered that he was still out there, that he could be following them. He could be close by, closer than they knew. Ray. She turned and lifted a finger to her lips to signal him to stay quiet. Callum took a tentative step forward, cradling the little dragon in one arm, and his other hand delicately found her back, as the pair silently surveyed their surroundings. Rayla swallowed hard. Do you know which way we need to go? She whispered, feeling Callum's hand hesitantly leave her back and fumble for the compass in his bag. He offered it out to her, the arrow wavering and pointing them off to their left. Mercifully, it didn't tell them to head back the way she had run from the evening prior, and she let out a small breath. Okay, we need to be quick, but tread carefully. The last thing we want is to make it any easier for someone to follow us. Ray? His voice was as quiet as hers, and he leaned a little closer, eyes meeting hers. We need to get you to a doctor. She shook her head, frowning. There's no time for that. We need to push onward. She heard him huff inaudibly through his nose a little, but didn't argue any further, as Rayla took a few steps forward. She would manage for now. She had to. They had been walking in a tense silence the entire day, stopping only to eat and exchange quiet words about the journey ahead. At about lunchtime, Zim was finally beginning to wobble around like a newborn deer on his legs again, toppling over and over again as he attempted to walk and get the feeling back in his little muscles. His carers both appreciated the effort. Carrying the baby all day was exhausting work. It was evening by the time Callum made his concerns apparent again. If you're not going to see a doctor, then will you at least let me help you? It was a Moonshadow Elf custom not to show weakness, and that letting someone other than a medic or healer tend to your wounds could be taken one of two ways. The first was almost an insult, the offer suggesting that you were too feeble to take care of yourself. The second was a far more intimate gesture. Too willing to let someone take care of you was the ultimate sign of trust and was something usually reserved for family or lovers. So it was understandable when a fury of emotions caught in Rayla's heart. She almost said no as a force of habit, but his eyes were so soft and pleading, and his hands were so gentle against her arm. And now he was smiling so kindly at her, and she wondered if he could feel her trembling slightly. He looked worried now. Rayla, are you okay? You look a little red in the face. Oh, that didn't help at all. Yeah, She glanced away sheepishly. You can, if you want, I guess. When she caught his eye, he was smiling warmly again. Thank you. To Rayla's surprise, it didn't take long for her embarrassment to subside. There was something that felt so soft and sweet about this. And it just felt right. Callum was someone so dear to her, and to let herself willingly be vulnerable around him, it didn't feel as awkward as she had expected. She watched him work, cleaning and binding up her wounds as best he could with whatever he had to hand, usually little rags of fabric. And he was so tender and careful. Any time he felt her flinch from pain, he'd pause, give her a soft, apologetic look, and continue only when she quite quietly reassured him. He left her shoulder for last, clearly unsure about how best to approach it. His hands hovered over and around it timidly. Can I? She nodded softly. Just be careful. I'm pretty sure it's broken, so it hurts like a nightmare. With as much care as he could, and with Rayla's help, he removed the shoulder pad from her arm, then placed one hand on either side, feeling carefully, tentatively, applying pressure. Fear flickered across the human's face, and he didn't meet her eye when he spoke. His voice was low and quiet. Rayla, I think it might be dislocated. Oh, joy! He ran a thumb gently across the line of her collarbone until it hit the fabric of her shirt. It sent little sparks of pain through her, and she twitched a little, her fingers curling and her face scrunched up. He looked pensive, then ran it along again a little lower this time, and pushed about halfway up until it brushed against a particular sore spot of the bone. I think you've got a little break here, too. I think you might be right, she hissed painfully through her teeth. Her voice seemed to bring him out of his trance. He pulled his hands away and turned so the backs of his knuckles brushed gently down and across all the torn muscles and wounds littering the area. She had probably broken more bones than Callum could find, ripping more muscles and ligaments if the ringing pain was anything to go by. He resigned himself quietly to at least try to clean the dried blood off her arm and dabbed gently with a damp rag at the bloody wounds around her shoulder, where the mace had punctured her skin. It was no surprise to her that they were bleeding again as Callum worked. All the moving about didn't give them the time they needed to properly heal, and she had reopened the wounds across her body a few times as they'd been walking, trying not to bring any attention to them as to not worry her companions. He really did a number on you, didn't he? There was remorse in Callum's voice now when he finally spoke again, and something coated his words, something sad and regretful. Callum? I'm sorry. For what? His apology took her by surprise, and she leaned forward a little to try and look him in the eye. But he looked away shamefully. If I hadn't distracted you, if I'd been more careful and keeping a lookout for threats, then maybe he wouldn't have knocked me and Sim out. And you wouldn't have gotten hurt. Callum, don't you dare blame yourself for this. You didn't. We didn't know. We thought we were safe. Her voice was firm, but she softened a little when she noticed his hand trembling slightly as he held the cloth to one of her many injuries. Callum, look at me. Begrudgingly, he did so, and she smiled warmly at him. I'm okay, see? Yeah, I'm a bit banged up, but I'll be all right. We escaped with our lives, and if it makes you feel any better, I'll go see someone about this as soon as we can, all right? Maybe we can find some medical help wherever we end up going. Callum relaxed a little at her words, and she watched his sad eyes brighten up a little. All right. She gave him a little nod and let him continue. The mood was less tense. She had closed her eyes at some point, quite content, but her ears pricked up at every tiny sound around them. It was a little bit of a surprise to her when she heard a shuffle of fabric and felt Callum wrap something soft and warm delicately around her. She peeked an eye open and found something red draped on either side of her neck. Rayla, I've got to move your arm, okay? He warned quietly, and she nodded, bracing for the throbbing pain as he ever so gently lifted her forearm. She winced, but he held it gently and wrapped the scarf under her arm to support it, wrapping it around her again and then tying it together on near her other shoulder. He tugged the fabric gently around her forearm and elbow so that the weight was evenly dispersed. Her arm rested at an almost 90-degree angle against her now. Hey, there you go. That'll do for now. Not too bad for a makeshift sling, right? It's not too bad at all, she smiled. Could do with being a little tighter, though. My arm's kind of hanging a bit limp. She chuckled and watched as Callum leaned across her carefully to tighten it a little, glancing between her arm and her face. How about that? Much better, Dr. Callum, she replied, and she watched a little grin split across his face. Zim cooed up at them, his head resting against Rayla's lap. You're right, Zim. Callum is good at taking care of us, isn't he? Callum blushed a little, laughing it off, and finally relaxed by Rayla's side, scooping up Zim to lay the dragon along both their laps. He purled and rolled onto his back, and Callum brushed his hand across the baby's belly, Rayla feeling the dragon prince's cheerful rumbles as he did. How are you holding up? Rayla finally asked quietly. A lot better than you, I imagine. Callum? I'm okay. A little sore, but it's mostly fine. It's just if I try to breathe too deeply. I get these terrible shooting pains through my back and like along here. He gestured with his hand along his side and down at the slight diagonal across where the middle of his rib cage would be. Rayla slung her free arm slowly around his back and rubbed it gently, and she felt him lean against her ever so slightly, supporting most of his weight on the hand resting just behind her. Maybe we should get you looked over too. Maybe. I hope I haven't broken anything. His hand rested on the top of hers as her hand trailed to his side, where he described the pains as being. Rayla bit her lip as she recalled the image of the hunter stepping on Callum, the soft crack of something under his foot, and Callum whimpering in pain. It caused an ache in her heart, and she squashed the memory down bitterly. I guess I won't be using Aspero for a while, he mumbled. Oh, no, that's half of your entire spell list. Rayla cracked a little smile, trying to lighten both of their moods. Callum sniggered. Yeah, I should really try and learn some new spells, huh? You don't happen to know any other draconic words relating to the sky, do you? Even if I did, you still need the runes for them. She felt his shoulders slink a little, and she gave him a little encouraging squeeze. Hey, that's what we're working towards, right? The compass is leading us to where we're meant to go, to teach you more magic. So maybe it'll lead us to, like, some ancient sky mage in a tall tower who can teach you a bunch more spells. Yeah, he beamed. It's going to be great. Rayla smiled at him fondly. I'm so proud of you, she thought. You've done so much I thought was impossible. And you continue to amaze me in different ways every single day. Yeah, it'll be great.